Hi, it's Jared from Strongroots Farm. Welcome back to the farm. Today we're going to talk about raising cattle, and we're talking about the basic equipment you need to do this properly. So yes, we will talk about if you need a tractor or not. Do you really need a tractor? That's in every one of these videos, and we will cover that. But there are a lot of other things that I think people miss in their videos that I'm going to go over today. Stick around. Welcome back, thanks for joining us. We will get to the tractor as the last thing because I think everybody covers that pretty much, but I have some factors that people really don't think about a lot, so stick around for that. As we get started, I have several videos about this. So I have a beginning cattle farming video where we talk about the markets and the systems and the different models in cattle farming. So that'll be covered in that video. I also have another video that talks about the infrastructure you need. That will cover the fence and the barns and the things like that. Today, we're going to talk specifically equipment. It's a rainy, nasty day, so we're kind of going to be in the barn a little bit. We'll get out. The first piece of equipment you're going to need is you need some way to move round bale hay. Now, if you say, well, we're thinking about doing square bales, I have a video where I break down the costing of why this is a bad idea, but I'll take you through all the different sizes and shapes and the ways to feed different hay in this video. And all of these videos are down in the description. But we got to talk about hay. And so you have a few different pieces of equipment that are a good idea. You obviously can have a tractor, which we'll get to, but you could have a round bale 3-point spear on a smaller or older size tractor that looks something like this. It'll cost you about $200. You won't be able to stack them, but you will be able to move the hay bales around. As we talk about hay, you have two options. You can buy baling equipment, which I don't recommend. So a baler, a cutter, so a mower of some sort, whether it be a sickle bar mower or a rotary mower. There's different types of mowers out there. You're gonna need a rake at minimum. Now, I don't own a tedder, but a tedder is another piece of equipment that fluffs the hay to get it to dry out if you get it rained on. The minimum package of decent used equipment is gonna be about 20 grand, not including a 55 horsepower tractor to pull this equipment. Now, can it be done for cheaper? Yes, but you better be a good mechanic and have a lot of patience, because if you buy it cheaper than this, you're going to be working on the equipment a lot, which for some of you is fine. Do not buy a square baler. You need to buy a round baler, but that is the basic equipment that you're going to need to bale hay. If you do not bale hay, because you have to have hay, you're going to need a trailer, looks something like this, to haul the hay. Or if you say, I have somebody that will haul all of the hay for us, just know it's usually an extra $5 to $10 per round bale to have that hay hauled in. Next is we're out in the rain. You've got the hay now. You figured out what you're gonna do for hay. You need a way to feed the hay. That is a hay ring. They're gonna cost you anywhere from $150 for an older used one at an auction to about $400 for the nicest all metal with metal wrapping around the bottom like that one, brand new from Tater. But you need a hay ring like that, or you can build a fence line feeder or a barn feeder like we have here. Now, this one here will hold 3 round bales. So it's a pretty decent setup. We have 30 head of cattle all the time, and this is good. They can't all get to it. We'll have 2 different sets, but you want about a third to half as many head spaces as you have calves, because they're gonna be in here eating quite a bit, and that means that you have hay in front of them all the time. The costing on a unit like this is gonna be different for every person depending on the type of structure you build. But you could pretty much estimate this out with each one of these head gates costing anywhere from $250 to $300. You need at least 2 of them. Some people will use an old round bale one like we did. We had a beat up old round bale when we got at an auction, cut it in half for the end. They also make a 6-foot straight that you could buy for about 180 bucks. And then concrete, if you're pouring concrete, how are you gonna do that? How are you gonna build a roof? We've got about $3,000 in this one, but it is 16 foot out and 20 foot long. So estimate the cost there yourself, but you're gonna need some way to feed hay, and that's 2 major options. Now, there are a plethora of different kinds of feeders, and that hay video that I recommended to you goes through all of those. But some that are popular on YouTube I want to talk about now, like a bale unroller. These things are pretty cool. You don't need a big tractor. You can use a four-wheeler. But that bale unroller by itself is $3,500 if you buy it brand new. You can find a used one, but people think they're worth a lot of money, so they're still going to be $2,500 to $3,000. A four-wheeler that has four-wheel drive that is strong enough to pull that used, unless you're a really good mechanic, is probably going to cost you around $3,000 to $4,000 just to pull that. Or you can use a smaller tractor that is older. That's going to cost you $4,000 to $7,000 as well. So think about that. By the time you add all that up, you could almost buy a tractor that would pick it up. And if you're a Salatin fan, he has his book, Polyface Designs, where they show these feeders that look something like this. But what he doesn't tell you is the economics of square bale hay to put up into that feeder if you're using small square bales. So something that looks like that right there. It's incredibly expensive. If you do not know the economics of hay, you really need to watch that video that we talked about on the economics of hay. He does large square bales. So with that, you need a skid steer or a tractor to move these large square bales because they can weigh 700 to 1,000 pounds. You can't pick those up. Now, once they are in place, if somebody will deliver them and stack them in your barn for you, and then you feed them by hand, can it be done? Yes, but the cost of hay is still significantly higher in buying large square bales, and to find the right guy that will deliver and stack it in your barn for you is gonna cost you more. So there's a big economic push here. If you try to go with something Salatin recommends, I'm not knocking Salatin, you just need to know the full story of using that kind of a feeder. Next, we're gonna need a way to water the cattle. Now in the rain, like it is today, it's not a huge deal, but you can take and buy a 55-gallon drum like I've seen people redneck it and build, and you can buy one of these for 20 bucks and cut them in half. Now I will tell you, half of that barrel will water 2 young calves for 1 day. That's how much water they drink. So you're gonna be filling it every day, but you can get through something cheap like that if you water them every day from a hose and take care of it like that. But it doesn't keep it from freezing. Let's look at some other options. So there's the normal Farm and Fleet. Rubbermaid makes a good one, tote like this that you can water in. Once again, you have to fill them with a hose, or you can use a Jobe Mega Flow valve. You can attach one of these. We use these a lot. We love these on my farm. In fact, I've made a video on the best waterer for rotational grazing, which comes from one of these right here. I would actually recommend the 75-gallon one if you're gonna have a Jobe automatic one, but these come in multiple different sizes. They tend to be priced, if they're new, it's about $1.50 per gallon. So a 300-gallon tote like this would cost you about 450 bucks. But at auction, you can find them for $1 a gallon, sometimes even cheaper than that. And they do have some off-brand ones that are a little bit cheaper, but I really like the Rubbermaid agricultural ones for quality, just so you're aware. Now, so that you have the full story there, if you buy one of those totes during the winter, you're gonna need something like this. It's $50. I'll tell you here, we spend $38 or 38 cents a kilowatt hour, and this costs me about 30 bucks a month. They use quite a bit of electricity. We are in Ohio, it is cold here, so you have to have electricity and you have to have something like this in it to keep that water from freezing. Can you go bust it every day? Are there other gimmickal things? Yes, but the tried and true method is electricity. Now the other option you have is to go all in and buy an automatic waterer like this. This is the only one we recommend. It's the pride of the farm. They're blue, they have the flapper lids. You can take the lids off to train. You can also turn the lids upside down. That will help the cattle figure out where the water is. This is the only one we recommend because it's the only one we found that will not freeze. We've seen -8 for multiple days. They did not freeze without electricity, meaning there's no heater in this. It just doesn't freeze because water comes up through the ground about 50 degrees and it is insulated well enough and works well enough that that won't freeze. But here's the price tag. These things are about $500 in the magazines, and you can find them for a little cheaper on sale at different shows and different things. but you're gonna have about $1,000 into one of these by the time you're done. That's a true story. By the time you trench the water line and water line fittings, pour a concrete pad or buy a concrete pad, there's some conduit that's needed down in the ground, and the unit itself, trust me, you're gonna have about $1,000 into this installing it yourself. Pay somebody to do it, go ahead and double that price. The other piece of equipment that I would recommend is a manure spreader. Now, I paid $2,900 for this piece of junk one at an auction. I'm a good mechanic and I've worked on it a bunch, okay? So it's gonna cost you, go ahead and budget about $5,000 for a good one. And you can have a smaller one, but it takes a lot of work. Cows are gonna produce about 50 pounds of manure a day. So think 5 days, 2 or 3 calves will fill a 55-gallon drum with manure. It's quite a bit of manure that they put out their rear end because they put a lot of hay through. Plus, there's a lot of bedding, whether it's wood chips like we have, or straw, or sawdust, or whatever the material would be. Old hay is really good. Somebody cleaning out an old hay barn, that's money. Find that stuff if you can get it for $1 a bale or even cheaper. Buy that as bedding. That is really good bedding. But you need a way to get rid of that. And that is the truth. Now, some people will say, no, I hate a manure spreader. And there's a guy on YouTube that's very famous that says he doesn't own one and that he recommends you don't get one and that you won't need it. Well, that's coming under the assumption these cattle are never gonna have shelter on your farm. Now, if you live in Louisiana or perhaps Texas, maybe that is the truth. But here in Ohio, we need shelter from lots of ice and wet rain and cold, cold winds. They need some way to be protected. When you put them in a barn, they poop in the barn, and then you have to clean the barn, and you need a manure spreader like that. It has more uses though than just spreading manure. We love it for spreading these wood chips. We get wood chips for free for the tree company. That piece of equipment is awesome. You put the clean wood chips in it, you drive around real slow, it puts a perfect layer out. We don't have to spread them by hand. It's a great piece of equipment, but it's about $5,000. Now, to give you some helpful hints on that, because that's a piece of equipment that we don't use an awful lot. It gets used maybe 10 days a year here, and I've got $3,000 in it and probably 20 hours of labor. A helpful hint is if you are farming with a group of people, like if you're in a community within 15 miles of somebody and there's 4 or 5 of you, you can all share one of these. Now, I'll tell you, anytime you share equipment with people, one person takes the brunt of the fixing. And there's always the one guy who always winds up breaking something and he can't fix anything. So you have to be really committed to these people, just forewarning you. But this is something that I would recommend. The way to work that situation is one guy buy it and own it and be the mechanic of it and rent it to the other people. The guy who is renting it, who's taking the brunt of the labor, will pay for it with the rent. And it's a good deal for the renters because they don't have to maintain it. They don't have to put all that money into owning their own personal one. So we could rent one of these for $150 a day. And if I had a good one like that, I think even though I have the skills to fix this and I have the money, I'd probably rent one. Speaking of cleaning out that barn, there's really only 2 ways to do it: a pitchfork or a bucket, which means you need a bucket tractor. We'll get to that. But this is a forked bucket. If you're gonna have cattle, their manure gets in big clumps, and when you try to scoop it out, it'll fall out of a standard bucket. That's why we have a bucket, a fork bucket like this. Now, I made this one. I bought a regular bucket, a second one, and I welded all those tabs in. If you have those skills, you can do that and save a little bit of money. I probably saved maybe $1,000 or $500 versus buying a new forked bucket, building my own like that. But you're gonna need something to clean out that barn. If you got some strong backs and a few pitchforks, yeah, you can do it in a few days, but it's nice to have this because we load our wood chips with this. We do a lot of work around here with this. We clean out sticks out of dirt, lots of stuff. Grubbing, we use this. Lots of different uses than just cleaning poo, but this is a nice tool to have. And since we're on little front implements talking about that, you're gonna need a bale spear to pick up those round bales with that tractor. This is a 3-point bale spear. It goes on the rear end of an older tractor. We like this because we can put one on the rear end and one on the front, move 2 at a time. Another useful attachment is a set of forks. So if you're gonna use feed, what we're gonna get to in a second, having a set of forks with a tractor to unload bulk feed will save you a little bit of money, and you can get equipment and seed and other things shipped to you now, and you can then move it around. So a set of forks is really nice to have. It's not necessary. You don't have to have it, but it is a nice thing to have if you are gonna get a tractor with a bucket. Speaking of feeding grain, now we are a grass-fed only farm, except for one calf, Miss Limpy right here. We've decided to feed her grain, and we have a little bunk feeder. Now this is a little, I think 4-footer, 5-footer here. It's a teeny little bunk feeder. We've got 3 more actually that we bought at auction in a big group of equipment. Basically, I bought them from the guy that I bought the farm from here so that he didn't have to have an auction, but we paid auction price for all of it. And you need a bunk feeder. You need some way to feed the cattle in a feeder. You do not want to feed cattle on the ground. Now, you can, but we don't recommend it. You could easily do this with pigs, but cattle need some sort of a feeder. Could you make this out of wood? Could you use pretty much anything? Barrel cut in half? Yes, you could. There's all kinds of ways to make one of these, but you're gonna need some kind of feeder option like this if you're gonna feed grain. So pricing on these bunk feeders, little 4-footer would be fine for 2 or 3 calves at the most. Those are gonna run you probably $50 a foot. So that one's probably 150 bucks. We have some 8-footers out here. Those are about $400. The barrel cut in half long ways. So this is cut crossways, that barrel right there. But if you cut it long ways and you tied them together, you could have 2. They can be on the ground. You can put them up on stilts with 2x12s or something. That's probably the cheapest way to do it, but they tear them up pretty quick. They are nice to chain them together in like a train, and you can pull them along with a side-by-side or something. So that may be the best way for you to go as a beginner, but you're gonna need something like that, and there's your pricing. Now, since we mentioned the side-by-side, we have an old Gator. I will say this is not a necessity. This is a novelty to have. But I only bring this up because this is by far the most used piece of equipment on my entire farm. I mean, every day. Every day I use this Gator. I'm gonna caution you here. You could spend $25,000 on a side-by-side or even a John Deere Gator. They're ridiculous. These 4-wheel drive, independent suspension, they're awesome, but they are extremely overpriced or extremely expensive, however you wanna look at it. Even though I use this every day, what I would recommend to you is this is an old Gator, like 1991, and I'm not aging myself here, but this is an old style of a Gator. But the older ones are really simple. It's simply a motor, a centrifugal clutch, a belt. Now, I've had to rewire this one and do a few things to it, but I don't mind it getting beat up by my kids because it's an old one. I paid $3,500 for this. As a beginner, that may not be something you want to buy, but if you buy one, buy it smart. This will do way more than a golf cart. Some people try to get away with a golf cart, which is fine. But if you're going to spend $1,000 on a golf cart, I would say save your money for a while. I'll give you some other options out here, and then buy an older Gator or an older off-brand side-by-side like this. I like the older ones because they're simple. They're easy to work on. So with the Gator, we drive it around, we haul feed, we haul all of our stakes, we do all kinds of different stuff. A 4-wheeler is good, but it doesn't have a bed. It's harder to haul 2 people on a 4-wheeler, but they have more power, they're better 4-wheel drive, they go through muddy and hill places better. You can get that old Gator stuck on an old cow turd, but it's more useful than a 4-wheeler, I feel like. But the main thing is you gotta have something to carry these stakes and stuff. And one cheap way to do that as a beginner is a carryall. I picked this up for 80 bucks at an auction, and you can tell I'm getting a lot of use out of it, but this would be a cheap, easy way. Put a platform on it out of wood, put some PVC pipe to hold some tools, and you got you a good way to carry stuff around, to clean in woods and all kinds of stuff. And you can do it for a couple $100 if you have an old tractor, put that on the back, and it'll get you suffice until you get some money and get built up in your homestead or small farm. All right, last thing before we get to the tractor is a good electric fence charger, okay? So this is my SpeedRite i6000. You need a good electric fence charger. We have it hooked, the outlet that is plugged into is hooked to that blue light. So when we turn the power off to that, the light goes out. I recommend a colored light like this. This is a good idea that I came up with actually. And so when we see the blue light is on, we know the power is on to our charger. Let's get in the barn, it's getting nasty. Okay, let's talk about a tractor. And I had to get in, the weather got really bad there really quick. But as we talk about a tractor, they're super expensive and everybody knows this. And there's all these people that say, you can do this without a tractor. Now, one way that I will agree that this is possible is if you have a skid steer. If you have a skid steer because you're an excavator or something like that, you can get away with using the skid steer to move round bales and move feed and all that kind of stuff for a few years. But a tractor is very handy. Now, one thing I'll tell you is buying new sounds good because they have 0% interest and there's programs and there's grants and there's things that are there to help you get a tractor, but only have to make the payment. So be hesitant to that. I would really tell you if you could pay cash for it, that's best. If you can work on something, an older tractor, they're even better, I believe, than the newer ones. The newer ones have DEF and some other things that come along with them. They have computer systems that make it hard for normal guys to work on them. So an older tractor really has its benefits, even though it's not new and it doesn't maybe have that new car smell and the feel and all that kind of stuff. So you need something, you have to look at specs on tractors where they can lift a certain amount of weight. I'm gonna recommend to you that weight be 2,000 pounds. It needs to be able to lift 2,000 pounds, 8 foot high at the pivot point. So there's multiple different brands. Do not focus on a brand. I would not say buy a weird, crazy brand that nobody's ever heard of before. Stick to the major ones, but you're buying a dealership. So go into a dealership. If they treat you like a human, then that might be an option. If you go in and you feel like, I've talked to 3 different people in this dealership and I feel like I'm an outsider and nobody cares about me, I don't care what the brand is, leave. Leave that dealership. Heck with those guys. Find a dealership that cares about you, that is willing to work with you, and that you feel like you get good customer service because you are buying the dealership, not the brand. Now with that, if you're buying a used tractor, you're probably not gonna buy it from a dealer. You're gonna buy it from a marketplace or a trader or an auction or something. But it's important that you find the dealerships. Okay, we've got 5 dealerships within an hour and these 2 are jerks and these 3 I could deal with, but this one is my favorite. Now you know your brand that you're gonna search for. Then try to buy it used and buy a good tractor that has low hours. What are low hours? I would prefer a tractor below 2,000 hours. Can an old tractor be good and have 7,000 hours on it? Yes, it depends on the guy who had it though. 7,000 hours with a roughneck is bad. 7,000 hours with a guy who took pristine care of his stuff, it's probably still a good tractor. But 2,000 hours and less can still be bad if a guy was really, really rough on it. If the plastics broke off and things are bad, I would kind of be hesitant. But if it looks like the guy took care of it, 2,000 hours and below is usually pretty safe. You need at least 50 horsepower, typically, on a tractor to lift a round bale. But once again, you're gonna look up specs on the lifting capacity. Now, what about if you can't afford a tractor that has a front end loader on it? You can buy a tractor, something similar to this. Old Fords, Massey Ferguson, even John Deere, old tractors. Kubotas are a newer brand in the grand scheme of things, but if you can find an old Kubota, those are fine as well. That doesn't have a front loader, you can lift stuff with the 3-point. But remember, you can't clean out a barn, you can't stack your hay and save space, so there are advantages for that loader. That loader, I will tell you, is the number 2 piece of equipment I use on my farm. It gets used just slightly less than that gator, but we use it for everything. It is worth the money. Can you buy a tractor and then add a loader? Yes, you can. I would not recommend an aftermarket loader. Buy the loader that came on that tractor from the factory. So if you're buying a John Deere, you're buying a John Deere loader. It hooks up, it works well with it, but no, there are some other things. It's not simply buying the loader and attaching it when you get home. There are hydraulic systems and lines, and not all tractors were set up from the factory to be attached to a front end loader. Some of them don't have the hydraulic manifolds to run those. So you could be adding a lot of extra money if you don't know what you're doing. The best case scenario is just to buy a tractor that's already set up with a loader that was meant to be on it. Last thing, every time I mention a tractor on my channel, I have 15 comments, which I love, about what do you think of this brand? I'm telling you now, I don't think anything about anything brand. I don't have a brand that I'm loyal to. When I was young, we were loyal to John Deere. John Deere has changed the way they work. Okay, they have changed their whole demographics and their whole dealership plan. I'm no longer happy with John Deere. John Deere makes a great tractor. You pay a lot of money for green paint, I'll tell you that. But the dealership when I was a kid was what we were buying. Okay, and that's what I'm going to tell you. The dealership is what you're buying. You're not buying the brand. Take that point. All right, there you have it. So sorry the video ended up in my house and not in the weather. Weather didn't cooperate with us, but that is all the equipment that you need to get started and some things for you to think about. Are there more? Are there other things that you could get? Yes, there's lots of little fencing tools and lots of little hand tools, lots of things that can help you. Another one that probably should have ended up on that list is a zero-turn lawnmower. So if you're gonna have fence and cows, a zero-turn lawnmower is very effective when it comes to cleaning fence. When you want to see some of these other tools and some of these other things that we use, subscribe and check out my videos because there's a bunch of them, a bunch of different things that we do. But the basic things are, you need some way to move hay, you need some way to feed and water, and some way to clean manure and keep your animals safe. If you touch those three bases and you work around and look at what you can get for the money that you have, you're gonna be all right, and then you build slowly from there. One thing when it comes to buying equipment is please be smart with your finances. We follow Dave Ramsey, we try to pay cash for stuff. I'm only telling you this point, and it's pretty obvious amongst things, everything is very expensive. It is very hard to pay a tractor payment with cattle. If you buy a $50,000 tractor, you better have 100 head because it takes a lot of animals and a lot of land and a lot of time to pay for very expensive stuff like that. If you're gonna have 2 or 3 on a small home, small farm or homestead, you might look at some other avenues or just know you're paying for that tractor out of your own pocket for your hobby farm, okay? Hope that helps you. I appreciate you watching. Please check us out. We have lots of videos. If this video helped you, there are some other videos down in the description, like I mentioned, that will really get you started off on the right foot. Until next time, have a good one.